Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Davis. This is really cool. I got to tell you, it's an honor to be part on the inaugural kickoff of this aspect of MasterClass.
Yeah, it's a new, for those of you who aren't aware, MasterClass Live is a new asset that we are going to be creating that provides a way for our users to interact with our instructors in a live setting, and also give them new ways to engage with our content beyond our live streaming videos, our downloadable workbooks, and our mini apps. So Chris Voss is the former chief hostage and kidnapping negotiator for the FBI. He also taught negotiation at Georgetown and USC business schools and launched his very own masterclass on negotiation at the end of last year. I am Davis Carter. I am a senior creative producer here at MasterClass. And I also had the privilege of overseeing the creation of Chris's class. And like I said, Chris, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. This is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it. We're going to sing a couple songs, crack a couple of jokes. We'll have a good time, right?
Exactly right. Have you got your beer there that we talked about having?
It's after 5 someplace, right?
Exactly right. Exactly right. So, we think this is a great opportunity to provide people with some inspiration and a positive distraction in these challenging times. And on that note, one of the things that I thought was really interesting is that we recently learned that your lesson on tactical empathy is actually currently the most watched chapter on the platform. And I thought that was kind of an interesting window into the times that we're living in right now.
Yeah, that is interesting. I appreciate you sharing it with me too. And tactical empathy, for those of you, if you haven't had a chance to watch the course yet or read the book, it's probably really hard to tell what the title of my book is. It's saying what the other side's perspective is. That's empathy. Yeah, it's easier said than done, because what if you disagree? Well, you should really be able to say it. What if they're wrong? You should still be able to say their perspective. And the tactical aspect that we added to it, why we use that term, is when empathy was first sort of came back into common language, it's been 30, 40 years really. We didn't have neuroscience to back up how the brain works, and we got it now. So if we know how the brain works, why not tactically take advantage of that? It's good for people. It works. Those are the 2 reasons why you should engage in a negotiation skill. Number 1, if it works, and number 2, if it's good for people. That pass both sniff tests. So I'm happy to hear that people are engaging that for better communication.
Yeah. And in kind of like speaking of the world that we're in right now, I kind of wanted to start this conversation by taking a look at the situation that everybody is dealing with, and how that might impact the way that we're engaging with other people, but also the way that we're negotiating with people. And I guess like my first question for you would be, does this change the way that we should be negotiating?
Well, no, I don't know that it changes the way we should be. It probably changes the way we are.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some real bad habits out there. One of those bad habits is you got to get your point across, and people focus on that first. Hear the other side out first. The way you should be negotiating is you actually go slow to go fast. Hear the other side out first. You'll get the chance to make your point quicker where they're able to listen. This is sort of an adaptation of advice from way back when of Stephen Covey. He said, seek first to understand, then be understood.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is seek first to demonstrate understanding in order to be understood. So yeah, we should be doing it. Are we doing it? No, it's mostly an argumentative society these days, battling counterpoints when nobody listens.
Mm-hmm. And it's almost like I find myself thinking like the stakes feel really high right now. Like everybody's kind of on alert. And so it seems like, I guess they're more tightly wound. And it's even more powerful now than it could have been 4 weeks ago or, 3 months ago. And more important.
Yeah, well, we're in the middle of a shift. I mean, this hardship is going to create great things on the other side. For example, I was talking to somebody the other day. the younger generations, quote, the millennials, 20s, 30s, who are much more comfortable with technology the way some of us older folks are not. Technology is here to enhance everybody's lives. All generations are being forced by having to stay at home to adapt to technology. And with that, let's make our communication more effective. Let's hear each other out. Let's use negotiation really as a means for drawing closer together, for establishing better relationships. So, I think this shift that we're in the middle of, as painful as it is, and the cost is going to be high in the interim, when we come out on the other side, we're going to be in a better place.
Well, that's encouraging. And I'm curious, when we were talking last week, you mentioned that some of your clients at the Black Swan Group have been coming to you and looking for advice for how they should be approaching their negotiations in the world we find ourselves in. And if you're open to sharing it, I'd be really interested to know what kind of problems they're coming to you with and what your advice has been to them.
Yeah, well, people are looking to pull out of deals. They're scared.
Yeah.
What does this look like going forward? The uncertainty is ridiculously, it's even traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
Not knowing when something is going to be over or how far this is going to go. Those are some of the highest stressors that there are. And so, I'm telling people to chunk it out a little bit. First of all, articulate the other side's fears. And we'll use adult language here, not bad, but a little bit. I got a client called us up and said, this is a shit show. Mm-hmm. And I said, all right, so that's the way to describe it, because it cuts to the heart of the matter. It's what everybody's feeling. So when you talk to the people that are scared to death and feel like they're in the middle of a manure show, to calm it down a little bit more, say that exactly. Say, this is a shit show. You're scared to death. You don't know when this is going to be over. There's nothing that works faster and more effectively to driving a stake through the heart of somebody's fear other than just recognizing it. It seems counterintuitive, but it's enormously effective. And that's what we're coaching people to do, help them clear their heads by facing this head on in an unflinching and fearless fashion.
That's really interesting. And as I was preparing myself for this, I was kind of always trying to think about what your answers might be. And I was like, I actually don't know what people will be coming to him with, but that makes a ton of sense, that the accusations audit, which is one of the tactics that you talk about,
right,
a really important one right now.
It's a robust application of the accusations audit. And again, what we talk about in the course is, what are the fears that the other side has about the situation? What are the accusations they might make at you, about you, towards you? And just articulate them, do an audit, make an inventory, list them out, and start your conversation that way. Mm-hmm. And it's ridiculously effective on how fast it accelerates communication. And it's actually really effective. Mm-hmm. Get you to where you want to be really quickly.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to get you to talk about the Black Swan consulting that you're doing, because I know tends to be with people that are very high profile. So thank you very much for that.
And everybody could use it. I mean, we try. It's one of the brilliant things about MasterClass. I mean, what we've been blown away with by being, me and my team. It's always, you want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go as a team. Mm-hmm. MasterClass is such an accessible, ridiculous value. The amount of instruction that you guys put out there for the subscription price and the high quality of it. I mean, I love doing the shoot with you guys. You guys made me feel like a movie star. I never got treated that well before. It was a lot of fun. Production values are through the roof. It's insane.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And we were sure to have U2 playing whenever we broke for tape resets, just to keep the energy high.
You guys know I'm a big fan of U2. Yeah.
We did our research. That's our job. So I have another question that has to do with the current state of affairs, and we aren't going to spend this entire conversation talking about it, just because it will pass, as you've said, but it is top of mind for a lot of people. But while we are on that topic, I'd be curious to know how you might approach negotiating with somebody who, for example, is having a hard time convincing a loved one that they need to heed warnings to shelter in place, for example. Like, how might you approach that?
Yeah, well, I mean, what's driving people to not want to stay sheltered in place? I mean, we have a fairly current term, FOMO, fear of missing out.
Mhm.
That's not a new idea. You know, fear of loss, fear of missing out has been driving human behavior since we've been organized. You know, Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize in 2002 for prospect theory, which is basically built around fear of loss, things twice as much as an equivalent gain. So how do you deal with that? People don't want to stay in because they're afraid they're missing out. So we ask questions, what and how questions, not to get answers. You know, we call them calibrated questions, principally what and how questions. We ask them to trigger thought, to trigger deep thinking that, again, that Daniel Kahneman would refer to. So, you know, you ask somebody, how long do you want to be laid up sick? When you get sick, how long do you want to be laid up? What's it going to cost you to get this? Let's say that you're even in an age group that's calculated to survive. You're just going to get sick. You're going to get over it.
Mm-hmm.
How many of those symptoms do you want to inflict on yourself? Have you read people talking about losing their sense of taste and sense of smell for periods of time? How long do you want to go without your sense of taste? You know, those questions are not to get an answer out of somebody. It's to ask them, and don't ask it in an accusatory fashion. I probably even said it a little accusatory just now. You know, it would be more like, how long do you want to be sick? You know, that's deferential. That's curious. Mm-hmm. How long are you willing to be sick? Mm-hmm. How much risk do you want to take in spreading it to you? You'll survive, but how much do you want to risk your loved ones? Mm-hmm. You know, ask questions to get people to think about what they're doing. And that's the design of those questions, the what and how questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that was one of the things that I found. I mean, of the many things that I found that were so enlightening about your tactics was when I imagined myself on the receiving end of it. I was like, you're right. I would think entirely differently about that thing. If somebody said like, you're crazy, what are you doing going outside? Like, why are you putting people, you know, like in danger, you know, like stop doing that thing. Like that just as the natural human condition, you're going to have your guard up and you're going to be resistant to that.
Yeah. And, you know, and if I could interrupt you real quick, because you touched on an inadvertent mistake that people are going to make a lot. When you use in your example, asking someone, why are you doing that? Why always makes people feel accused. It makes them feel defensive. Mm-hmm. So you stop asking people why. Yeah. I mean, change why to what, instead of like, why are you doing that? Even if you don't like it, you're going to say, you know, what's causing you to do that? Mm-hmm. It takes the sting of accusation out of why. And so be really careful about asking somebody why, because the defensiveness that it's going to trigger is probably going to damage the interaction, if not the relationship.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But when you're asking somebody like, what's it going to take, you know, or the how questions, it really does, it prompts introspection on their part.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it makes sense. And your tactics prove effective in yet another context.
Exactly. Human interaction. It only works where people are involved.
Oh, okay. Just then. Got it. Right. Yeah. My other question was that a lot of people are finding themselves in new dynamics a lot. Like parents that are now home with their kids 24/7, which I'm sure they enjoy. Right? Yeah, they're exactly. They are. Yeah, they're the hostages now. And so I'd be curious to know what you think, what advice you would have for those people that are now in a constant state of negotiation with their kids or loved ones than they didn't used to be.
Yeah, you know, a lot of it is kind of the same stuff. It's the interesting thing about this when we were talking about how human beings are wired. This also includes pretty much anybody whose cognitive wiring is in place, which is kind of from about age 3 on. You know, they're developing more and more cognitive abilities. And even from the very beginning, you know, their neuroscience wiring is there. You know, as an example, I talk all the time about, you got mirror neurons in your head. And, you know, if I smile if you can see me, if you can hear me, I can hit your mirror neurons. I can trigger a reaction. So if I smile at you, you know, I'll hit your mirror neurons and you'll start to smile. And so one of my favorite neuroscience experiments I'll be sitting on a plane. There'll be a lady next to me with a baby. I'm like, all right, so this kid's supposed to have mirror neurons. Let me smile at this kid and see what happens. So I'm sitting there grinning at this infant, giving him smiles, and the kid's smiling right back. And, mom thinks I'm this great guy, and the flight attendant thinks I'm this one. Oh, this guy's really nice. He likes kids. And I'm like, I'm doing a brain science experiment here just to make sure.
Yeah.
I'm conducting lab experiments.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, getting back to kids at home. Parents, this is your opportunity again to shape your kids' thinking. What and how questions are designed to shape thinking. Don't tell them stuff. Ask them, what are they trying to achieve? Make them think about what they're doing. How does this affect what you want? They don't want to eat. They want to play with their iPad. So make the eating the condition to get into the iPad. How am I supposed to let you play with your iPad if you haven't finished your dinner?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter what they answer them. What matters is you made them think. You're giving your kids thought exercises.
Mm-hmm.
You're helping preserve their autonomy. You're helping them become better human beings and grow in their thinking processes. This is an opportunity to just take a little bit slower approach with your kids and actually get farther faster by taking the seemingly indirect approach.
Yeah. And the preservation of the autonomy is another thing that I thought was really fascinating. It's something that resonated for me as well, thinking about it when I was like, oh yeah, when my autonomy, when I feel it's in danger, my guard goes up, or, and I'm, yeah, it's being able to formulate your communication in a way that preserves that is so powerful.
And that's a human nature response too. You're not doing that because of your age, your gender, your ethnicity. Mm-hmm. Human wiring, we're wired for our autonomy. You can't point to a civilization in the history of mankind that was content being slaves. And we're broadcasting from a country that's founded on autonomy. Give me liberty or give me death. That's not an American response. That's a human response. Mm-hmm. People will die to preserve their autonomy.
Mm-hmm. And so in changing, I guess, like not necessarily accusations, but directives into questions, that's one of the ways that we can help kind of navigate that and not butt up against people trying to preserve their own autonomy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good how or what question is one of the great ways to do that.
Got it. Well, cool. Well, thank you. I think there's going to be a lot of questions flying around at homes later on today after people have watched this, putting things to the test now.
Stuff's occurring to me. I get it. One of my favorite examples of a how question, because at the start of the book, we talk about, you learning to use a question. How am I supposed to do that? And mm-hmm. I use it in kidnapping negotiations. And I used it, the example at the start of the book is me negotiating sort of a mock negotiation with Robert Mnookin, who's the head of the program on negotiation at Harvard, and a brilliant dude. Robert Mnookin is a smart guy, just like everybody else at Harvard. Clearly, that's why they're there. But I hit him with how am I supposed to do that in this mock kidnapping negotiation, and he was flummoxed by it. So everybody kind of learns that. So I get an email. A mom is negotiating with her 13-year-old boy. He wants mom to buy this video game, pay for the whole thing. And he says, Mom, this is a video game. This is how much it costs. I want you to buy. And instead of just saying, now, she just said, how am I supposed to do that? And he goes, okay, I'll pay half. Immediately, he cuts his price by 50%. And she says, this is so cool. I'm going to keep saying, how am I supposed to do that till I wear them out? And she asked him about 4 or 5 times. And finally, the kid goes, Mom, are we really that poor? He just becomes completely worn out and exasperated. And she's kind of like, yeah, that worked good. I like the way that worked.
Keep that one in my back pocket. Yeah, that's awesome. So shifting gears from, the world that we find ourselves in, like I said, it will pass. And so I'd love to take a little bit more of a positive lean for just the next few minutes. And also for those of you who are just joining, this is MasterClass Live. We are here with Chris Voss, who is the former chief hostage and kidnapping negotiator for the FBI. And he is also a MasterClass instructor and he taught a class on the art of negotiation. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. And let me throw out just a little fine point. I was the lead international kidnapping negotiator. The guy that ran the unit while I was there was Gary Nessner. He was unit chief. A bunch of us worked for him. My thing was principally international kidnappings, and I learned a lot from Gary, and I'm appreciative of everything that I learned from him.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I've got a I'm gonna have a note for Wikipedia on the title.
Yeah, well, Wikipedia, right? That's,
yeah, it's true.
They do their best there, but
yeah. Well, I know, and in my research, I know that I have your full bio, but I was like writing, as I was writing up all my talking points, I was did a quick check, and I will be sending a note to Wikipedia. But appreciate it. Thank you. So I would love to just quickly talk, maybe for like the next 5 or 10 minutes, about your experience since MasterClass, and what that's been like. And I think like what's been your favorite part of having your class out in the world?
Yeah, the people that recognize me from MasterClass are about learning, and that's cool. It has brought me into contact with so many interesting people. If they say, hey, I saw your MasterClass, interested people are interested. These are interesting people. They're interested in the world. They want to learn. They're worth having conversations with. If somebody is taking MasterClass, this is somebody that I'm going to want to sit down and have a cup of coffee with, have a meal with, have a drink with. Whatever they're doing, they're cool. If they're into learning, they're cool. And I really enjoy that, meeting more interesting people. And that's been one of the really fun things about having been involved.
Well, that's awesome. And have you learned anything about yourself or negotiation as a result of this process?
Well, yeah, I like to think I'm learning all the time. So I got to hand it to you guys, though. You teased the story out of me at the end of the master class, about when I got picked on as a kid that I hadn't discussed with anybody else before, and the fact that that was buried in there so deep, and the effect that it had on me, because I knew I hated bullies. I just kind of forgotten why, which has also given me an opportunity to think a lot about that. And think about how that's adjusted me, and how, what's my best reaction to someone that I feel has harmed me in the past. And, it's sort of, I think it's really helped me in processing things like that, get better as a human being. So that was another aspect of it that I really enjoyed.
Got it. And this is my shelter in place at work. We have I think a delivery at the front door. Sorry about that. And so for those at home who might not have seen your class, would you mind sharing that experience with them?
Yeah, well, I got cornered by this guy as a kid, 2 different times. And it was the first time that I can ever remember being cornered by anybody. And it was the most scared I was ever in my life. And there were other kids that were watching. He was this big guy, and, he was a bully. And at the point in time that he was threatening me with, I had broken a law. I was going to go to prison. I was going to be electrocuted, putting these horrible images in my head. Simultaneously, at that time, back in the dark ages before the internet, I grew up in a small Midwestern town, and, the signal to come home was, my mother, she didn't, they turned us loose on the neighborhood. We were fine. So she come to the front door and she'd blow a whistle, and I meant come home. And it was dinner time. And I remember hearing the whistle blow, and the kid wouldn't let me go. And I was horrified. I didn't know how to deal with it. And I think a couple of other kids at that point in time screamed at him, let him go. And for whatever reason, he let me go. And then he cornered me in the community pool a couple of days later and started bullying me again. I started to cry. And I think when I was crying, the lifeguard overheard what was going on, and she blew the whistle at him, said, hey, leave him alone. And, I'd forgotten about all that. And so, going back through it and thinking about it again and processing it, we learn. And sometimes some of the stuff that we learn are from our scars, and we just as soon not have had those scars inflicted on us, but it takes us to where we are. So I'm happy with who I am today, and you know, to heal, you got to go from grief to gratitude. And in a bizarre sort of way, I'm actually grateful that stuff happened to me.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, I mean, for sharing it with us. We were really happy that you felt comfortable enough to do that, both in your class and here. It's actually, it's funny that you say that about scars being a part of who we are, because I have a tattoo on my arm that essentially, it's Latin, but it translates to scars are okay because they show that you've done stuff.
That's cool.
At least that's the sentiment behind the translation.
You got to get out there in the world and get scarred up a little bit.
Exactly.
Unfortunately.
Yep. Agreed. Well, thank you. On a lighter note, for the next little bit, I would love to have you answer some questions that were submitted by your MasterClass students. So these are people.
Yeah, be careful, because you're getting ready to make me cry here. You know, there's no crying in baseball. You can't make me cry on camera, all right?
You got it. So these, we put out an alert just a little while ago to your students, letting them know that we were going to be doing this MasterClass live event with you. And the response was pretty overwhelming. It's been really, really exciting to see how many people were interested in following up with you and having this additional interaction with you. And so unfortunately there were so many that we can't answer all of them. But we're excited to do this and to have you share even more of your mastery with us in this way.
Happy to do so.
Yeah, of course. So the first one that we're going to ask is, it's from Nicholas, and he has a question about mirroring. His question is, how do you usually respond when a mirror goes nowhere? Sometimes I'll mirror someone and they'll just say, yes, like, didn't you hear me the first time? And that's one of my biggest hurdles. So I was wondering, could you, just give a kind of a quick Cliff Notes version of what the mirroring tactic is and how you might navigate this sort of a situation?
Yeah, the mirroring tactic is just principally repeating the last 1 to 3 words of what somebody's just said. This is completely separate from what we've learned in body language. And body language mirroring is like, if you put your hand to your chin, your right hand to your chin, then I put my right hand to my chin and I start to mirror you, and theoretically we're in sync. Hostage negotiators mirror is all about the words, and it's 1 to 3-ish words, principally the last 1 to 3-ish words. You might pick, 1 to 3 from the middle of the conversation. Interesting thing about the last 1 to 3 words, it's often when someone's trying to collect their thoughts at the end of the situation, end of the sentence, end of what they've just said. And that's why it's such an opportune time to repeat those, because it helps somebody sort of gather up their thoughts. It connects thoughts. They'll typically go on using different words. Like one of my favorites, one of my favorite stories, when my son mirrored me. My son, Brandon, is president of my company, runs our operation. He's a phenomenal negotiator. Phenomenal. And uncredited co-author of the book. Mm-hmm. So we're doing a training session, and I ask him if he's got the notebooks ready. And, his picture in his head of a notebook, he senses that he's seeing something in his head different than I am. And so he says to me, what do you mean by notebooks? And I just react with, like an American overseas, I'm going to say the same thing again, only louder. Notebooks, like that should, by saying it louder, the same way it has more meaning. Mm-hmm. And finally, he just mirrors me and he goes, notebooks? And I go, yeah, 3-ring binders, which is a completely different thing.
Yeah.
So, it helps people reword. Now, to get to the question, Nicholas, my first thought on that is your tone of voice. You might be mirroring with a downward inflection. And what's a downward inflection? What I'm doing right now is a downward inflection. Your voice tails down at the end. The first thing to do is mirror with curiosity. And I just hit you with a curious tone of voice. And so mirror with curiosity, the last 3 words. I can say the last 3 words. That's mm-hmm. downward inflecting. Or I can say the last 3 words. And those land completely differently. The curious tone of voice, genuine curiosity, inquisitive, is much more encouraging. And your percentage chance of them going on instead of the 1-word answer is much higher. Mm-hmm. with the inquisitive, curious tone of voice. Now, should that fail you, we teach people to shift to a label. What's a label? Saying it seems like, it sounds like, it looks like. Putting a label on an emotion or a dynamic. So the dynamic in the moment is, if someone gives you a one-word answer, they're communicating to you that what they just said was blatantly obvious, or maybe it seems like they're communicating to you they think you're thick or you're a little slow to catch on.
Mm-hmm.
I'd follow that mirror up with a one-word answer. My first label might be, sounds like you think this is so obvious that I'm just kind of thick for not catching on. I might shift to the other companion skill to draw it out, because if somebody gives me a one-word answer, they're communicating either one or two things. What they just said to them was so blatantly obvious that it needs no further explanation.
Mm-hmm.
Or principally, they may also be communicating to you that they don't trust you yet, and they're keeping the walls up.
Mm-hmm.
So I might also say, sounds like you just don't trust me yet. Or seems like it's kind of hard to earn your trust, because when you do trust, you trust completely, and that's why you're keeping your guard up. I'm gonna tentatively, gently sort of probe around the outside of this with mirrors and labels till I get past their guard, and I reward them for dropping their guard by continuing to be very respectful and deferential, so that they don't regret dropping their guard.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. And it was, I think, when we were filming your class, there was, we were talking about the importance of flexing these muscles, of using these tactics a lot to get more comfortable with them. And I think it is sometimes easy for, even for me, to like lose sight of the fact that a lot of the tactics that you talk about are meant to be used in tandem.
Right.
And not necessarily in isolation, where you're like, in this conversation, I'm going to mirror this person and just repeat, probe for more information by repeating what they're saying. That if you do meet a roadblock with one, you can often pivot to another, which is, I just think, really makes them even more versatile. So that's great.
Yeah, the mirrors and the labels are great complementary. And actually, labels are great at complementing all the other skills. And when we're doing our in-person training, we spend a lot of time on mirrors and labels just to build people's agility in the moment. You get good at mirrors and labels, your agility in the moment is going to be really high.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, I hope that answers Nicholas's question. Thank you. The next one that we have is from Angel. And her question is, what advice do you have for women when using the late night FM DJ voice? When I try using this technique, it feels like it sets the wrong tone. So do you have any tips for specifically for female negotiators? And if you don't mind, if just to kick things off, as for those that might not know what the late night FM DJ voice is.
Well, a late night FM DJ voice is what I'm doing now. I mean, it slows down, it's downward inflecting. Now, because myself and most of my team are male, not all of us, but most of us, we demonstrate, and women will say, all right, well, fine, that's easy for a guy to have a deep voice. Well, it's not necessarily a deep voice. It's really just downward inflecting and slowing down. And, the female hostage negotiators that we taught, and fully half of the negotiators that we taught were women, and were exceptionally good at it. Some of us actually believe that the women are better than the men. Mm-hmm. They learned it. It takes some practice. Angel, you're probably thinking there's probably a bit of awkwardness in your head, and you haven't practiced it enough, so you need more small stakes practice for high stakes results. With your Starbucks barista, with your Lyft driver, with the waiter or the waitress in the restaurant. Get your small stakes practice in. Mm-hmm. You can do the late night FM DJ voice. Just slow down and downward inflect. Your voice has just got to drop at the end. It's a little more declarative. So you think gentle. Your inner voice betrays your outer voice. You want to be thinking gentle, slow and easy inside in your head, and it'll come out more in your voice. And then experiment in different circumstances to learn data improves design. figure out when you want to use it. But the only way you're going to figure out whether or not that's the right tone is by test driving it in as many small stakes conversations as you possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
And if you feel like it's at the wrong tone, then just be prepared to smile right afterwards.
And so what is the objective of the late night FM DJ voice? Like, so I know that it slows things down, but what is its other utility?
Well, objective, great question. First of all, I'm hitting your mirror neurons. I'm actually slowing your brain down.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a neurochemical reaction. We learned it in hostage negotiation. We thought it calmed people down. It does as a secondary benefit because their brain slows down. So what it does is it tends to calm emotions.
Mm-hmm.
It also tends to make the other side feel very sure about what you're saying. And so we use it occasionally in business negotiations now. If I get a term that I'm just not going to move on the term, like if I got to say no to you with the late night FM DJ voice, I'm not going to say no. I'm going to say, it just doesn't work. And you're going to feel that there's no movement on that term.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to feel attacked by it simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to feel cornered. My objective is to show no movement, no flexibility without it being offensive, without you feeling attacked, without you reacting negatively.
Mm-hmm.
So while it was the default voice for the hostage negotiator, in business negotiations, overall, it should be used about 15 to 20% of the time, max. Interestingly enough, depending upon the circumstances, for example, real estate negotiations, every conversation in the buying and selling of a home, when hopes and dreams for the future on the line, every conversation is a difficult conversation. Agent to agent conversations are difficult conversations. It really should be the default voice in negotiations such as real estate, buying and selling homes, where all the conversations are difficult conversations. The late night FM DJ voice should be your default tone of voice, as opposed to, your desire for it to be a happy circumstance. When you close, it'll be happy. A lot of real estate agents want to be happy and perky all the time. Well, it's counterproductive until you calm people down. And there's a lot of stress in real estate. I mean, there's no shortage of surveys that say it's one of the 5 most stressful events in anybody's life. So a little more late night FM DJ voice in those types of arenas.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So our next question is from Andrea. And she said, I just started my role as a key account manager, but due to the coronavirus, I'm unable to travel and develop relationships both internally and externally, which my job is highly dependent upon. What do you recommend? And I think this is it's certainly applicable now, but it's broadly applicable even in times where we're not dealing with what we're dealing with, where people need to try and develop these relationships, but might not have the avenues that they're looking for.
Yeah, well, here's your opportunity to get better at telephone calls and emails. But how do you get better at telephone calls and emails? First of all, you're being forced to go more on email. Again, you got to cut your emails down. Write shorter emails. Not longer. I mean, you hate reading long emails, and you probably write them. So you're trying to get a lot done in an email. Get less done in your emails. The last impression is the lasting impression. We call that in my company, we call that the Oprah rule. Because Oprah and her people live by that. A friend of mine, Cindy Morey, has been Oprah's booker forever. Cindy's a wonderful person. And she said, their internal philosophy, often in the entertainment world, they say it's in a limo, out in a taxi. But with Oprah and her people, it's in a limo, out in a limo. Mm-hmm. They realize how you're treated at the end is extremely important. They're determined that whatever your experience has been with them and their production company, in whatever fashion, you're going to feel like you've been treated well from beginning to end. Now, back in about 2008, I run across some Gallup poll data is shared with me that human beings, we don't remember things how they happen. We don't remember them chronologically. We remember the most intense moment and how they ended. The last impression is a lasting impression. What does that mean? What that means in your phone calls and in your emails, first of all, make them shorter. Secondly, whatever rosy language, positive first impression you're going to try to make. At a bare minimum, be determined to repeat that at the end.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whoever you're talking to, you might start out by saying like, hey, you know what? We look forward to a productive long-term relationship. We want to be partners with you for the next 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you say it at the end. The last impression is a lasting impression. Just because you said it at the beginning, the first impression is immediately wiped away by all subsequent impressions.
Mm-hmm.
The last impression is a lasting impression in your phone calls and in your emails. Make those positive greetings at a bare minimum repeated at the end. Now, the other thing I do on those phone calls and emails, if you're cold calling people, instead of starting out by saying like, hey, I love you, you're wonderful, start out with a little bit of an accusations audit. What's going through their mind? What's going through their mind is they're probably wondering why they took the phone call. So start out by saying like, you know, right now you're probably wondering why you took this phone call. You know, right now, even though you're at home, you're busy as heck, you're overwhelmed by the circumstances, and you're really worried about how long this phone call is going to take. Start articulating what's going through their mind as they're starting the phone conversation or as they're reading the email. Mm-hmm. You know, the CEO of Node, Fatemi, excuse me. They changed the beginning of their emails by starting out and recruiting programmers in Silicon Valley by saying what the guy is going to be thinking if he opened the email. Mm-hmm. And because their open rates, because programmers are in ridiculously high demand. They're the rock stars in Silicon Valley. You know, they're the divas. Everybody wants them. So they change their emails to, right now you're probably asking yourself why you're reading this email, which is what somebody's going to be thinking. And their open rate and their read rate went through the roof. Mm-hmm. So start out your emails and your phone calls articulating what you know is going through their mind. And you're going to find, and don't deny it, just say it. That's the massive 2 millimeter shift from the denial to simply saying it. And you're going to find that your phone calls while you're stuck at home, your phone calls and your emails are going to be far more effective.
Got it. Yeah. So accusation audit up front, and then great lasting impression at the end to kind of make those more, either just to optimize the communication when you are able to have it.
That's right.
Boom. Got it.
Look what you just did. You just got a that's right out of me.
Yeah. Pat on the back. So the next question that we have is from Dimitri. And his question is, in business negotiations, have you ever encountered somebody who knows your tactics? How do you go about the situation when somebody says, I know what you're doing?
All the time. I mean, first of all, we use it. It's not whether or not somebody's using a tactic. It's tactics. It's why they're using them. Mm-hmm. We use them on each other in the company all the time. Like nobody's tried to get me to say yes inside of my company in like 5,000 years, because yes is a horrible response. Everybody says, are you against, you disagree? Would it be a bad idea? You know, we're driving for no all the time because it preserves people's autonomy. Now, if somebody says, I know what you're doing, you're using negotiation techniques on me, you know, my answer is probably going to be, sounds like you don't trust me. Because if I'm using those tactics on you, you're afraid. You're worried that you know, I'm not in a position where I've earned your trust yet. You know, one of my favorite stories, because I've always been into labeling. I started this back in 1990s. You know, when I volunteered on a suicide hotline, again, before the internet, in the dark ages, before cell phones. And so I've been a fan of this stuff all the time. So flash forward to about 2006, I'm still in the FBI. I'm talking to other hostage negotiators, and we're having a disagreement. I say to one of my buddies, a negotiator, I said, you know, it sounds like this is really important to you. And he goes, don't do that stuff to me. Don't you dare use that hostage. Don't use that on me. And I just hesitated for a second. I said, sounds like that bothers you. And he went, yeah, you know, it really does. So, you know, just be authentic. Don't try to take advantage of people. And if somebody's got their guard up, they're telling you that their guard is up and that you haven't earned their trust yet, and continue to be deferential and gentle. And as long as you're not trying to cheat them, then it's okay. If you're trying to cheat them, you know, use your powers for good and not evil. Mm-hmm. I can sniff pretty fast when somebody's trying to cheat me. and they'll use my tactics on me, and they'll say, have you given up on giving us a 50% discount on your training? And my answer to them will be yes.
That's wonderful. Well, yeah, and I think if the intent, is an important thing. And also because if people had, taken your class or read your book, and taken it to heart, they'd know that your objective is negotiating to a better outcome, not win-lose, like I'm taking everything, therefore you're getting nothing.
Great long-term relationships.
Yep.
Great long-term relationships. We will prosper together. And in 20 years, when we talk about it, we'll say, wow, the last 20 years were awesome. Thank God we were partners. Mm-hmm. That's, a core value that I operate on, and everybody in my company operates on.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for that. So here's a question. It's from Teresa. And she says, how would you advise job seekers to respond to what are your salary expectations? This is hands down the most challenging question for us. Even though employers are not technically allowed to ask for it, it still prompts you to reveal it. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, you can reveal it, but you say, I'd be happy to share that with you. But let's pivot to the side for a moment, because regardless of the salary, they can pay you for a job that you're miserable in, and that's blood money. Salary is a term. Mm-hmm. Salary pays your bills. It doesn't guarantee your success. Set the salary off to the side for a second and say, what does it take to be successful here? Find out if there's a fit. Look, this is as much of an audition for them as it is for you. You don't want to take the wrong job, just like you don't want to be in a wrong relationship. You can always get back to salary. You can always ask that question. You can always come back and tease it out. I guarantee you there's a couple things on the other side. They got a range in mind. Number one, they are restricted to some degree. Also, they may not be able to pay what the market bears, but the upside for the job might be worth well in excess of what the market bears. I mean, I'd work for minimum wage for Warren Buffett. Who are you going to be around? What are you going to get the chance to do? I'd work for minimum wage for Elon Musk. I'd get Elon Musk's coffee if I could hang out with him and learn from him. So what are the other things involved? How much is the job going to grow you? All right. So now let's say all these things have been passed and you want to get back to salary. My first response is, sounds like you guys probably already have a range in mind. I'm going to tease out from them. I'm going to do everything I can to tease out the salary. If I'm not willing to settle for like my previous job, and they're not supposed to ask you what you made in your previous job anyway. Mm-hmm. But I can say, look, I can tell you what I made in my previous job if you're determined to know that. And I can also tell you that I'm not going to accept that here. So if that's going to impact your decision making on this, then I'll tell you. But it's a non-starter from the beginning. A lot of things that have to be talked about around salary that you can do respectfully. Mm-hmm. And what if they won't let you do it? I'm here to tell you that is not the job for you. I'm going to be your dad here for a second. Should you be in an abusive relationship personally? No. Should you be in an abusive relationship professionally? No. If they won't let you explore around that and they're determined that you have to give a number, I'm here to tell you, not only is it a bad job for you, but that company is going the way of the dodo. They're going to go out of business. Your experience there is not going to be valuable. Your time there is going to be wasted. There's a reason why at least 40% of the Fortune 500 is going to be gone in 10 years, because there are a lot of poor big business practices out there. You don't want to work there. Don't let yourself to be a hostage to a bad job. Mm-hmm.
And that's really, really valuable insight. And I love also what you were saying about ways to pivot, because there are ways that you can kind of tease it out without having to answer that question. Well, they shouldn't be asking it in the first place, but there are ways where you can kind of turn it back around on them. Like it sounds like you guys already have a range in mind, or it sounds like I can tell you, but I can tell you that it's kind of irrelevant because I'm not going to accept it here. That's great. I'm going to be doing that in my next salary negotiation, which hopefully won't take a little while because I like it.
Yeah, well, you're in a great place. But I got to tell you what, in my company, we're looking to hire people. I need to know what you're going to be comfortable with. Like, I'll need to explore both previous compensation you had, because I know that previous compensation, I've got to do that, or I've got to do better than that, because you got to pay your bills. And if for some reason we settle on a number that's lower than what you've been making, I've just cheated you, and I've put you in a position where you're going to be anxious in a job. You're not going to be successful. So I'm looking to hit a range where you feel like you're being really well paid and that there's tremendous upside. Like, my company pays bonuses. We love a base plus bonus.
Mm-hmm.
I need to make sure that you could pay your bills. And then I'm going to share the upside with you. But I'm also going to want to make sure that you're comfortable with that, because there's a certain amount of uncertainty in bonuses. You don't know how much you're going to get. And I got to feel you out for how comfortable you are with the uncertainty factor. Or would you rather have a fixed number that overall is going to be less than what you might have gotten with bonuses, but you don't want to worry about what you got? I mean, when I was with the FBI, it was a good salary. It wasn't a great salary, but I never had to think about how much was coming in the door, which left me free to excel. In the compensation package in my company, we want to tailor it to you as much as we possibly can, because I need to make you successful. And if I don't make you successful, I failed you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Understood. Hopefully Teresa can put that to work. So for our last question, it comes from Ali Risa. And her question is, so I really enjoyed my experience in your class. My favorite movie in negotiation is Dog Day Afternoon.
Excellent.
What movie would you recommend and is your favorite to allow me to improve my negotiation skills?
Oh, wow. All right. So, Dog Day Afternoon it was a great film. Certainly interesting, based on a true story. Actually came out while, the guy who was the bank robber in Dog Day was still in jail, which was a crazy, crazy thing.
Mm-hmm.
So improving your negotiation skills. In general, overall, like, I watch Shark Tank for, as opposed to movies. And I like watching the interaction. Lori Grenier's got a great tone of voice. I mean, she's got a phenomenal voice. I mean, she has mastered both a downward inflecting and smiling tone of voice simultaneously. It's ridiculously powerful. I like watching Mark Cuban in that. Mark Cuban, who comes across as, a tough, hard-nosed negotiator, actually is constantly testing people. Mm-hmm. And then for him, the negotiation is a testing process. Cuban realizes that if he does business with you, that ultimately you're going to have to be his ambassador, and he doesn't want business partners that can either be pushed around, who don't think on their feet, or who are rude. Mm-hmm. And Cuban's not a bully at all. He's testing people in the negotiations, and you watch people who can push back on him politely, and he kind of goes like, oh, cool. He wants to do business with those people. So, I'd take you out of movies and I'd put you in one of the shows that I watch for real life skills. And I really like watching the Shark Tank interactions a lot.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I got to go do that too. Well, thank you. So Chris, that wraps up our time. I want to again say thank you for coming with us for our first ever MasterClass Live. I'm psyched that you got to be our inaugural instructor.
This was an honor. I mean, what you guys are doing, you're literally making the world a better place. You're putting out some ridiculous quality instruction. You're putting out entertaining instruction. I mean, the idea that Chris Voss is on the same platform as Martin Scorsese is just insane. To me, that's a sign of the apocalypse. But the fact that you guys got him and Gordon Ramsay and Steve Martin, Ron Howard, the other superstars, brilliant minds. I mean, I love what MasterClass is doing. I mean, I'm enormously grateful to be part of it.
Thank you. And on that note, with the MasterClass Live sessions that we're going to be doing in the future, they are going to become a regular thing for us. And for the time being, in front of the paywall. So not exclusive to subscribers, just because of the way that things are right now. It's something that we want to make available to everyone. But again, Chris, thank you so much. I will leave it at that. I hope everybody had as much fun as I did.
I did. Take care, everybody.
See ya.